Oh my gosh, please pray with me. Your word is a lamp to our feet and a light to our path. May these words, may our meditations, may our actions proclaim your word today. Amen. In this moment, I'd like you to take just a time to think about your life. You might even close your eyes. Think about the people in your life, your family, your friends, your work colleagues, those people who have touched your lives. Think about your home. Think about your place where you walk, where you shop, where you find delight and recreation. Think about where life crackles for you, that place of joy and mystery combined with fulfillment and enrichment. Think of how full it is. Sure, some of us live life at different paces. We live life at different speeds. But it's pretty full, pretty rich, pretty graced. And we're pretty attached to it. Right? Pretty attached to that life and all of what it means. So it must be a mind twister to hear the scripture. Those who want to gain their life must lose it. It must be crazy making. What is Jesus on about? Or rather, what is Mark getting Jesus to be on about? It must be crazy to think of the lives that we have and to hear those who want to gain their life must give it up. After this really interesting encounter between Peter and Jesus, we'll get to it in a minute, but that interesting encounter, Jesus says to his followers, with his eyes set on Jerusalem now, if any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it. And those who lose their life for my sake and for the sake of the good news, the gospel, will save it. What does that even mean? Let's talk a little bit about the Markan community, the community of Mark, the Jewish Christians living in Gentile territory to whom this gospel was written. I promise I'll bring it around to us in a few minutes, but we need to understand how these words first came to be written and to whom. These Jewish Christians were living in conflict in around 60 AD, in conflict conflict with their Jewish families and friends because the idea of a crucified Messiah was preposterous to those Jewish people in the temple and in the synagogue. Keep that in mind. The Jewish war had ended, 60 AD, with the destruction of the temple, and those who worshipped in the temple said it was the fault of this Messiah, this crucified Messiah, and the fault of those people who believed that. That's why it happened, this Jewish war. What made it matters worse was that the long-awaited promised return of this Messiah, which these Jewish Christians fully expected to happen, where Jesus' defeat in death would be vindicated by God, a second time had not yet happened. So these people are waiting for Jesus to show up again. They were waiting for the expected second coming, and it wasn't happening. And into this tension between Jewish Christians and non-Jewish Christians, there appeared on the scene false prophets who were undertaking miraculous signs, healing, signs and wonders in the manner of the Jesus of Nazareth, teaching secret lessons about what discipleship meant and these esoteric ways of being community. And these false prophets were pulling the Markan community apart. They were coming apart at the seams. Even Peter was attracted to these others of these false prophets, this false Messiah. So when Jesus asked him, remember that interesting exchange? Jesus asked him, what are the people saying about me? And they tell him. And he looks at Peter and says, who do you say I am? And Peter says, you are the Messiah. But Peter is thinking about the kind of Messiah that's doing the signs and wonders and false teachings and all that stuff. And Jesus knows that. That's why he sternly tells Peter, say nothing to anyone. And he immediately says, if you want to follow me, you must give up your life. He's on his way to Jerusalem. According to Mark, who sets himself up, the writer of Mark sets himself as the preacher of the true gospel. That's why Jesus says, get behind me, Satan. You are putting your heart on the things of this world. Right? False prophet. The Messiah that Peter proclaimed in that moment is one of the false ones in Peter, and Jesus says, that's not true. So when Jesus says to anyone who wants to follow me must suffer and die, and Peter gets honked and pulls him aside and says, what are you talking about? Jesus says, get behind me. Mark's gospel, Mark's perspective is that the true Messiah is to be found in his suffering and his death so that God could take the decisive action of the resurrection. This is Mark's perspective. This is the true Messiah. It's about suffering and death. Now, I'm hunching I lost you. Some of you went, okay, that's gobbledygook, and I don't even know what that means. And you may be stuck back on paying attention to the life that you live, and hearing the words, you must give that up. I wonder if you're kind of paying, that's where you might be. Well, here's what I want us to think on. Each one of us, is giving up our lives for something. Each of us is living our lives for something. Some of us are living our lives for a career. Some people are giving their lives to their family. Some people are giving their lives to their community. Some people are giving their lives to the church. Some people are giving their lives to addictions. Some people are giving their lives to alcohol and sex. And some people are giving themselves to higher levels of education. Some to abusive relationships. Some to ill health. We are devoting our lives, giving up our lives to something. And we're pretty attached to it. Is it life-giving or is it soul-destroying? Hold those thoughts. And then I invite you to return to the life that you just reflected upon, the one you thought about at the beginning of this conversation. You have this life because of the amazing, abundant, endless grace of God. There is no such thing as the self-made person. We do not get where we are by ourselves. We are shaped, given form, formed by the creative genius of God who shows up in the experiences of our lives. We cannot forget this. And so, Andre Crouch's question that Kelly read in the call to worship comes home to roost. How do I say thanks? Well, this little story, which appears in all three of the synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, tells us how. From his prison cell in Nazi Germany, the great 20th century theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer was pretty clear. For the sake of spiritual freedom, God has acted decisively for all humankind in the death and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. He wrote these words, "When the Bible speaks of following Christ, it is proclaiming a discipleship which will liberate humankind from all human dogmas, from every burden and oppression, from every anxiety and torture which afflicts the conscience." He wrote those words. How then does anyone express gratitude? And Bonhoeffer turns to this turning point, this pivot point in Mark's gospel, and says, however we say thank you, it will be costly. It's costly thanksgiving. He writes, costly grace is the gospel which must be sought again and again. The gift which must be asked for. The door at which we must knock all the time. It's costly because it costs a person their life. And it's grace because it gives a person the only true life. All those good things about your life that you just thought about, your life, and what you are giving your life to, generous gratitude, sacrificial gratitude, gratitude that would have us stop chasing the false promises found in the things we chase. Putting an everyday relationship and practice towards the Christ of God's action is our first and foremost way of saying thank you. When we do that, life returns tenfold. This is true in my lived experience. If you want to ask me about it, I'm happy to tell you. It's true in my lived experience. I believe it to be true in your lived experience. I certainly believe it's true in the life of Lynn Valley United Church. Those who give up their lives, and think of what that might mean, for my sake and the gospel, will gain it. As we enter this very busy church year, we will be asked again and again to turn our lives over to the Christ of our faith, who continually asks us to seek, to ask, and to knock. May God help us as we respond with generous gratitude, giving our lives for the sake of our lives. May God help us if we don't. Amen. In our prayer, I'm inviting you to just sit in the silence of this moment. Close your eyes, put both feet on the floor. I was at the pastoral care team meeting on Friday where that's exactly what we did. We held silence. And it was incredible. And I invite you to hear Jesus' question. Who do you say that I am in your life?